A little boy vanished without a trace on Halloween night. 8 years later, his father finds a hidden key behind the fireplace that unlocks a truth more haunting than anyone could imagine. The crisp autumn air was thick with excitement and the sweet scent of pumpkin spice as the town of Willow Creek prepared for its most beloved tradition, Halloween night. Children dressed as ghosts, witches, and superheroes flooded the streets, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Among them was 8-year-old Ethan Parker, his eyes sparkling behind a homemade vampire mask, clutching a small, battered pumpkin bucket eager to fill it with candy. Mark Parker, Ethan's father, watched from the porch, a mix of pride and anxiety twisting in his chest. This was the first Halloween Ethan was old enough to roam the neighborhood with friends, and Mark had promised Lisa, his wife, that he'd keep a close eye. But as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, shadows lengthened and an uneasy feeling settled over the house. Something about this night felt different. Ethan was supposed to return by 9. The clock ticked relentlessly as Mark stood by the window, peering into the gathering dusk. Lisa fussed over the kitchen, nervously glancing at the clock, each minute stretching longer than the last. When 9:30 came and went, panic began to claw at their hearts. They called out for Ethan, checked the front yard, and then the streets, but he was nowhere to be found. The police were called, neighbors rallied, and flashlights flickered through the darkened streets. But the boy had vanished as if swallowed by the night itself. Mark's mind raced with every terrifying possibility. Had Ethan been taken? Had he wandered too far? The joyous night transformed into a nightmare. The town quickly mobilized. Posters with Ethan's smiling face appeared on telephone poles and store windows. The local news picked up the story, broadcasting the desperate search for the missing boy. Mark and Lisa held onto each other, their eyes swollen from tears, haunted by the silence where Ethan's laughter used to be. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like a sinister whisper. Days turned into weeks, and still no sign of Ethan. The investigation hit dead ends. Friends, neighbors, even strangers joined search parties that combed the surrounding forests and abandoned buildings. But their efforts were futile. The hope that had once burned fiercely dimmed, replaced by a gnawing dread that Ethan might never return. Yet Mark refused to give up. Every moment without Ethan was a torment, but he clung to the fragile thread of hope, even as it frayed with time. The community mourned alongside the family, the joyous spirit of Halloween forever stained with loss. That night, 8 years ago, changed everything. What had been a festive celebration became the darkest night in Mark's life. The night his son disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a void that no amount of tears or prayers could fill. As the years slipped by, the image of Ethan's bright eyes and innocent smile remained frozen in Mark's memory, a beacon in the relentless shadow of uncertainty. Mark sat on the porch long after the search ended each night, staring into the cold, empty streets, whispering his son's name to the wind. "Ethan, come home." The words carried on the breeze, a desperate plea into the silence. And somewhere deep inside, Mark knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed about love, loss, and the extraordinary lengths a father would go to find his child, no matter the cost. The days stretched into weeks, and the weeks into months. But for Mark and Lisa Parker, time seemed to freeze the moment Ethan disappeared. The world outside continued to turn, seasons changed, neighbors moved on, yet their home remained trapped in an endless state of waiting, a limbo where hope and despair fought for control. Mark found himself pacing the silent halls of the house, each creak of the floorboards a cruel reminder of Ethan's absence. The once lively rooms echoed with silence. The walls that had witnessed Ethan's laughter now bore the weight of grief. Lisa spent hours staring at Ethan's empty bedroom, clutching his favorite blanket as though it might somehow bring him back. Their marriage, once a source of strength, began to unravel under the pressure. Lisa's quiet sobs in the night contrasted sharply with Mark's restless energy. He buried himself in the search, obsessively scanning missing child reports, interviewing witnesses, and following leads, no matter how faint or implausible. Every Halloween reopened the wounds, a yearly reminder of the night that stole their son. The community's initial flood of support slowly faded. People whispered in hushed tones, some offering sympathy, others turning away, uncomfortable with the raw pain that lingered like a shadow over the family. Mark felt isolated, an island surrounded by a sea of grief. He was consumed by a relentless need to find Ethan, convinced that somewhere, somehow, his son was still out there, waiting to be found. Lisa, though equally desperate, struggled to maintain hope. She feared that clinging too tightly might break what was left of her heart. Yet she held on to Mark, the anchor in the storm, even as their relationship strained under the weight of loss and unanswered questions. Friends suggested counseling, community support groups, anything to help them cope, but the couple resisted, trapped in their private agony. The house itself seemed to mourn. Dust gathered on forgotten toys, cobwebs clung to the corners of Ethan's room, and the fireplace, once a place of warmth and comfort, stood cold and dark. Mark often sat by it for hours, staring at the mantel, imagining Ethan's small hands tracing the bricks, playing games, and whispering secrets. The fireplace became a symbol of his hope and his heartbreak. As the years passed, Ethan's birthday and Halloween became unbearable milestones. Mark marked them quietly, lighting a single candle in the window, a beacon for his lost boy. Neighbors sometimes left flowers or small toys on the porch steps, small gestures of solidarity that brought bittersweet comfort. Despite the crushing weight of grief, Mark never stopped searching. He took odd jobs, invested every spare dollar in private investigators, and never missed a single opportunity to share Ethan's story. His determination inspired others, turning him into a symbol of a father's unyielding love, even as it slowly ate away at his own spirit. Inside, Mark wrestled with guilt. Could he have done more that Halloween night? Should he have held Ethan tighter, watched him closer? These questions haunted him relentlessly, but the one truth remained. Ethan was gone, and until he found him, nothing else mattered. One night, as Mark sat alone by the fireplace, the house quiet except for the ticking clock, he made a silent vow. No matter how many years passed, no matter how many dead ends he faced, he would never give up. Ethan was his son, and he would bring him home. That promise was the fragile thread that held Mark's shattered world together, a flicker of light in a darkness that had lasted too long. Little did he know, the key to the mystery was closer than he ever imagined, hidden in the shadows of the very place Ethan had last been seen. One rainy evening, the kind that drapes the world in gray and muffles the usual sounds, Mark found himself alone in the attic of the old family home. The steady drip of water from the eaves was a soft reminder of the storm outside, but inside, a storm of memories raged within him. He had spent the day sifting through boxes long untouched, relics of happier times now tinged with sadness. Old photographs, worn Halloween costumes, and discarded toys were scattered around him like ghosts of the past. As he reached into a dusty cardboard box marked Halloween decorations, something caught his eye, a faded envelope sealed with a child's scrawl. Curious, Mark carefully pulled it out, the paper brittle with age. The envelope was addressed to Ethan, but the handwriting was unfamiliar, written in a shaky script that suggested a child's hand. His heart quickened. Inside, the letter was faint but legible. It spoke of a secret meeting place and urged Ethan to be brave, promising safety if he followed the instructions. The words sent a shiver down Mark's spine. How had he never noticed this before? He replayed the last night over and over in his mind, searching for any forgotten detail that might match the letter's clues. That's when it hit him, the basement fireplace. On the night Ethan disappeared, he had mentioned playing near it with his friends. It was an odd detail, something Mark had dismissed at the time as childish chatter, but now it took on new significance. They had never searched the basement thoroughly, assuming the boy had simply vanished outside. Driven by a sudden surge of hope, Mark descended the creaky stairs to the basement, flashlight in hand. The room was cold and dim, the faint smell of dust and old wood filling the air. The fireplace dominated the space, its bricks blackened with age. Mark's eyes scanned the hearth carefully, looking for anything unusual. At first, there was nothing, just the cold stone and ashes from long ago. But then, as his hand traced the edges of the bricks, he felt a slight give in one of them. His pulse quickened. He pressed again, and the brick shifted slightly under his fingers. Behind it was a small hollow space, just big enough for a key. His hands trembling, Mark reached in and pulled out a small, rusty key. It was old-fashioned, with intricate engravings that suggested it wasn't just any ordinary key. The weight of it in his palm was heavy with meaning. Could this key unlock a secret that had been hidden for years? Mark's mind raced. Was this key related to the letter he found? Did it unlock the secret meeting place Ethan had written about? Questions tumbled through his head, but one thing was clear. This discovery changed everything. The mystery was no longer confined to the outside world. It was hiding right under their own roof. For the first time in years, Mark felt a flicker of hope that went beyond desperate wishful thinking. This key was a tangible piece of the puzzle, a clue that might finally lead him to his son. He carefully pocketed the key, wiped the sweat from his brow, and prepared himself for what lay ahead. The house was quiet, but in Mark's heart, a storm had begun to brew, a storm fueled by determination, hope, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his missing son. Whatever secrets the basement held, Mark was ready to face them, no matter how dark or frightening. The journey to find Ethan was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that would change everything. The moment Mark held the rusty key in his hand, a mix of anticipation and fear settled deep inside him. His fingers traced the delicate engravings, and his mind raced with questions. What door could it possibly open? Was this the key to unlocking Ethan's disappearance? The basement fireplace, once just a cold stone fixture in his home, now felt like a gateway to answers he had longed for all these years. Determined, Mark knelt beside the hearth and inspected every inch of the surrounding bricks and woodwork. His flashlight beam flickered across the dusty basement, settling on a section of the wall behind the fireplace that seemed slightly different. Its mortar a shade newer, the bricks slightly uneven. Mark pressed against the bricks, and to his surprise, a small panel shifted under his hands. Heart pounding, he pushed harder, and a narrow door swung open, revealing a dark passage beyond. A cold draft brushed his face, carrying the scent of earth and secrets long buried. With a deep breath, Mark grabbed his flashlight and stepped inside. The passage was narrow and winding, the stone walls damp and cold. His footsteps echoed softly as he moved forward, every nerve on edge. The air was thick with dust and the unmistakable feeling of something hidden from the world for far too long. He thought about Ethan, the bright-eyed boy who had vanished so many years ago, and how this secret passage might hold the key to his son's fate. Mark's resolve hardened. No matter what lay ahead, he was ready to face it. As he ventured deeper, faint scratches on the walls caught his attention. Marks that looked like tally marks, counted carefully by a desperate hand. The passage twisted and turned, leading to a small, hidden room that looked untouched by time. In the center, a wooden chest sat covered in a thick layer of dust. Mark's breath caught as he approached the chest. Could this be a hiding place for Ethan? Was the boy trapped here, or had someone else used this secret room for their own dark purposes? With trembling hands, Mark lifted the lid. Inside, he found a collection of objects, old photographs, a worn notebook, and a small box wrapped in faded cloth. The photographs showed a young boy who looked eerily like Ethan, smiling beside a woman Mark did not recognize. The notebook was filled with cryptic notes and drawings, maps of the neighborhood, sketches of houses, and detailed plans that hinted at a hidden network beneath the town. Mark's fingers trembled as he opened the small box, revealing a locket. Inside, a tiny picture of Ethan, taken before he disappeared, stared back at him. Tears blurred Mark's vision as he clutched the locket to his chest. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind. Mark spun around, flashlight shaking in his hand. The narrow passageway was empty, but the presence was undeniable. He was not alone. His heart raced. Was it a friend? A foe? Someone who had been watching him all along? Mark's journey had led him to the edge of a revelation, but it had also awakened a danger he had never imagined. The search for Ethan was about to become more complicated and more perilous than he could have ever dreamed. Mark's heart pounded fiercely in his chest as the echoing footsteps faded into silence. The basement's stale air suddenly felt suffocating, every shadow stretching longer, as if hiding unseen eyes watching his every move. He gripped the flashlight tighter, the beam trembling as he scanned the narrow passageway and the small hidden room he had just uncovered. But no one appeared. "Hello." Mark's voice broke the silence, rough with tension and desperation. "Who's there?" Only the cold, empty darkness responded. His breath hitched as the silence pressed in, thick and heavy. He wanted to believe it was just his imagination, but a creeping unease told him otherwise. Someone had been here recently. The photographs and notebook lay scattered on the dusty floor as Mark backed out of the hidden room, clutching the locket close to his heart. He hurried up the winding stone steps, his mind racing to piece together what he had found. The boy in the photos looked like Ethan, but the woman was a stranger, someone connected to the secret network of tunnels and rooms beneath the town, perhaps. Back in the safety of the main basement room, Mark slammed the secret door shut and pressed his ear against it. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, hunted even. Yet, deep inside, a stubborn flicker of hope burned brighter than ever. This discovery was the first real clue he'd had in 8 long years. Determined to understand the meaning behind the photographs and the cryptic notebook, Mark hurried upstairs and pulled out Ethan's old photo albums from the living room shelf. Page after page revealed images of their son, but the photo in the hidden room suggested someone had been closer to Ethan than Mark had realized. Mark's fingers trembled as he carefully examined the notebook again, the intricate maps and sketches hinting at hidden passages and secret meeting spots around Willow Creek. Whoever had written this had intimate knowledge of the town and its secrets, knowledge Ethan might have stumbled upon. Mark realized he was no longer just searching for his missing son. He was unraveling a web of secrets that went far deeper than he had ever imagined. His hope was tempered by fear. The stranger's presence was proof that dark forces were watching, perhaps desperate to keep these secrets buried. That night, Mark barely slept. He sat in the dim light of the living room, the locket resting on the table beside him. The photograph inside was a small beacon, a reminder of the boy he had lost and the promise he had made to bring Ethan home. Despite the dangers, Mark's resolve was unwavering. He would follow this trail wherever it led, even if it meant facing enemies hidden in the shadows. The next morning, Mark called a trusted old friend, Sarah, who had once been a detective. He needed help understanding the notebook and figuring out who the mysterious woman was. Sarah agreed to meet him, sensing the urgency and pain in his voice. Together, they would begin to peel back the layers of the town's darkest secrets, inching closer to the truth behind Ethan's disappearance. But Mark knew the road ahead would be treacherous, filled with deception, danger, and revelations that would shake his world to its core. The search for Ethan was no longer just a father's quest. It was a battle against forces determined to keep the past hidden forever. The following morning dawned cold and gray, mirroring the storm of thoughts swirling inside Mark's mind. The locket with Ethan's picture sat heavily on the kitchen table, a silent reminder of the boy lost yet never forgotten. The hidden room, the cryptic notebook, and the mysterious woman in the photographs haunted Mark's every thought as he prepared to meet Sarah. Sarah had been a detective for over 15 years, known for her sharp intuition and relentless pursuit of truth. When Mark explained what he had found, the look on her face shifted from cautious concern to determined resolve. "This changes everything, Mark," she said quietly, flipping through the notebook's pages. "These maps and notes suggest someone was hiding something or someone right here in Willow Creek. And that woman in the photo? She could be the key." Together, they pored over the notebook's pages, decoding the sketches of hidden tunnels beneath the town, secret meeting points marked with symbols, and notes hinting at a covert group operating in the shadows. The entries spoke of protection, secrecy, and keeping Ethan safe. But who were they protecting him from? Sarah suggested they start by identifying the woman in the photograph. Using contacts from her detective days, she ran the photo through local missing persons and community records. Days later, a lead surfaced. The woman's name was Claire Matthews, a former resident of Willow Creek who had disappeared shortly after Ethan. Claire was rumored to have been involved with a secretive group concerned with exposing corruption in the town's leadership. Some whispered that she had uncovered dangerous truths and paid a heavy price for it. If Claire had been close to Ethan, perhaps the boy had become entangled in something far beyond a simple disappearance. Mark's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and dread. Could Claire hold the answers he desperately needed? Was Ethan still alive because of her protection, or was she a victim like him? They decided to visit Claire's last known address, an old, abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The house was overgrown and decayed, the windows boarded up, but Mark felt drawn to it, as if the answers were waiting inside. Inside, dust motes danced in the shafts of light, filtering through the cracks. Sarah carefully inspected the rooms, finding scraps of paper and faint traces of recent activity. In a hidden drawer, Mark found a worn journal filled with Claire's handwriting. The entries were fragmented but revealing. She wrote about a hidden network beneath Willow Creek, people who threatened to silence anyone who got too close to the truth, and her determination to protect Ethan at all costs. The last entry was chilling. If you find this, know that Ethan is not alone. The key is only the beginning. Trust no one. Mark's grip tightened around the journal as he stared out the cracked window. The mystery was deeper and darker than he had ever imagined. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, a fragile but undeniable chance to finally uncover the truth and bring Ethan home. Mark and Sarah left the abandoned farmhouse under a sky thick with threatening clouds, the weight of Claire's journal heavy in Mark's hands. The journal's cryptic warnings and references to a hidden network beneath Willow Creek haunted his every thought. The clues hinted at a labyrinth of tunnels and secret locations marked on the notebook's map, but none of the landmarks made immediate sense. The map seemed to lead to nowhere, an intricate web of paths that only deepened the mystery. Back at Mark's house, they spread out the maps and notes on the dining table, illuminated by a single lamp. Sarah's detective instincts kicked in as she examined the sketches carefully, comparing them with local maps and satellite images. Certain symbols recurred, like strange markings that resembled old runes or codes. "Look here," Sarah said, pointing to a cluster of symbols near the edge of town. "This could be an entrance to the tunnels. And see these marks? They look like coordinates or hidden messages." Mark felt a flicker of hope. If he could locate these places, perhaps he could trace Ethan's footsteps or find evidence of where he had been kept. But the further they dug, the more dangerous it seemed. Sarah warned Mark to be cautious. Someone else was watching, and they were desperate to keep these secrets buried. Determined not to let fear stop him, Mark decided to explore the marked locations himself. One evening, he drove to the outskirts of town, guided by the notebook's vague instructions and Claire's journal entries. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of leaves or distant noise made his heart race. At the first marked location, an old, abandoned well hidden beneath thick overgrowth, Mark discovered a rusted metal hatch barely visible beneath the moss. The hatch creaked open to reveal a steep, dark stairwell leading down into the earth. He hesitated only a moment before descending, flashlight in hand, into the cold darkness. The air grew damp and heavy as he climbed down into the depths of the hidden tunnels. The walls were rough stone, and the silence was oppressive. As he ventured deeper, Mark's light caught on faint graffiti, symbols matching those on the map. The tunnel twisted and branched, and though he felt the weight of fear, the determination to find Ethan pushed him onward. Suddenly, Mark found a small alcove carved into the wall, containing a makeshift shrine with a photo of Ethan taped to the stone, surrounded by small trinkets and notes. His breath caught in his throat. Someone had been here recently. Someone who cared. Mark's heart pounded with renewed hope. He carefully collected the notes, reading words of encouragement and love, and felt tears prick his eyes. Ethan was alive, or at least someone believed he was. But who? Mark knew that uncovering these tunnels was only the beginning. Each step forward brought him closer to the truth, but also deeper into danger. There were forces determined to keep this secret hidden, forces that might stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Back on the surface, Mark closed the hatch and looked up at the darkening sky. His search was far from over, but now he had proof, a tangible connection to Ethan's fate. The tunnels beneath Willow Creek were more than just forgotten passages. They were the key to unraveling a mystery that had haunted his family for years. The air outside the tunnel was thick with the damp smell of earth and moss, but the silence was shattered when Mark's phone buzzed insistently. He pulled it from his pocket, heart racing as he read the message. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." His hands trembled as he stared at the ominous warning. Someone was watching him, tracking his movements, and desperately trying to keep the past buried. The words sent a chill down his spine, but they also strengthened his resolve. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. Mark called Sarah immediately, his voice low and urgent as he relayed the threat. Sarah's face hardened with determination over the phone. "This just confirms what we feared. You're onto something dangerous, Mark. We need to be extra careful. Whoever's behind this doesn't want you to find the truth." That night, Mark sat in the dim light of his living room, surrounded by the scattered papers and maps. He stared at Ethan's picture inside the locket, drawing strength from the memory of his son's bright smile. The warning message weighed heavily, but fear gave way to anger. Someone had stolen his child, hidden him away, and silenced the truth for 8 long years. As the hours slipped by, Mark's mind raced with questions. Who was behind the tunnels? Who sent the threatening message? And most importantly, where was Ethan now? Suddenly, a knock at the door startled him. Mark's heart jumped into his throat. Peering through the peephole, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the darkness. Hesitant but curious, he opened the door just enough to speak. "I'm not here to hurt you," the figure whispered urgently. "I know about Ethan. I want to help." Mark's breath caught. Could this be an ally or another trap? The stranger stepped forward into the light, revealing a weary but determined face. "My name is Daniel. I was part of the group Claire wrote about, the ones trying to protect Ethan and expose what's been happening here." Mark's mind reeled. A new player in the deadly game he'd uncovered. Daniel explained that the tunnels and secret rooms were part of a covert operation to shield Ethan from powerful enemies who wanted to silence him because of what he knew. "But it's not safe anymore," Daniel warned. "They're closing in, and you have to be careful." Mark listened, torn between hope and fear. For the first time in years, a flicker of clarity broke through the darkness. The pieces were starting to fit together. Ethan had been hidden for his own safety, but now that safety was slipping away. With Daniel's help, Mark's search took on new urgency and direction. Together, they planned to follow the tunnels deeper, uncover the hidden truths, and find Ethan before it was too late. But Mark knew this was just the beginning of a dangerous journey. The shadows were closing in, and every step forward could bring him closer to his son, or closer to peril. With Daniel's presence came a mix of relief and apprehension. Mark wasn't sure if he could fully trust this stranger, but his desperation outweighed caution. The pieces were falling into place, and Daniel's knowledge of the tunnels and the shadowy group offered the best chance to find Ethan. They met under cover of darkness near the entrance to the network of tunnels Mark had discovered days earlier. The air was cold, and a heavy fog settled over Willow Creek, cloaking their movements as they approached the rusted hatch. Daniel produced a small key, worn and mysterious, which he said Claire had entrusted to him long ago. "This will open the deeper passages," Daniel explained quietly. "The place where Ethan was kept, where the truth lies." Mark's hands trembled as Daniel unlocked the hatch. The creaking metal door revealed a narrow staircase spiraling down into blackness. A faint, damp smell of earth and decay seeped upward, mingling with the cold air that seemed to whisper secrets. With only flashlights to guide them, they descended into the depths. The walls closed in as the tunnel narrowed, each step echoing against stone. Mark's heart hammered loudly, every sound magnified in the oppressive silence. As they ventured further, the walls bore strange markings, symbols Claire's journal had hinted at, signs of an ancient code used to communicate or hide secrets. Daniel explained that these tunnels were built decades ago by a secret society in the town, designed to conceal those they protected or hid from danger. Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinth, the tunnels twisting and branching unpredictably. They reached chambers filled with old belongings, faded photos, and scraps of paper, remnants of a hidden life that had once belonged to Ethan and those who sheltered him. Then, deep within the maze, Mark spotted something that made his breath catch, a small, battered backpack with Ethan's initials embroidered on the side. It was worn and dusty, but unmistakably his. Mark's fingers shook as he unzipped it, revealing a tattered notebook, a crumpled drawing of a family, and a small, handmade bracelet. Tears stung his eyes. This was proof Ethan had been here, that he was alive, held somewhere within this underground maze. But the relief was short-lived. Daniel's flashlight beam caught movement deeper in the tunnel, shadowy figures lurking beyond the reach of their light. Whispered voices echoed, urgent and threatening. "We're not alone," Daniel whispered urgently. "They've been following us. They don't want Ethan found." Mark's blood ran cold. The secret protectors and their enemies were still locked in a deadly game, and Mark had just stepped into the middle of it. Yet, despite the danger, his determination only grew stronger. He wouldn't stop until he found his son. Mark's heart pounded so fiercely it was as if it would burst from his chest. The shadowy figures lurking deeper in the tunnels were not just a threat. They were a warning. Whoever they were, they wanted Ethan's hiding place kept secret, and now Mark and Daniel had crossed a dangerous line. "Stay close," Daniel hissed, grabbing Mark's arm. "We need to move now." They retraced their steps, moving cautiously through the labyrinthine tunnels. Every noise echoed eerily. Every shadow seemed alive with menace. The closer they got to the surface, the more Mark could feel unseen eyes tracking their movements. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang rang out behind them. Someone had dropped a tool or weapon. Panic surged as Mark and Daniel broke into a run, the sound of footsteps chasing them through the tunnels. Mark's mind raced. How had it been found so quickly? Had someone been watching the farmhouse? The notebook? Had Daniel's warning been too late? Emerging into a narrow passage, they came face to face with a group of grim-faced men blocking the way. The tunnel ended in a wall of cold stone, trapping them. "Turn back," one of the men growled, stepping forward. "This is your last warning." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "We're not here to fight. We just want to find Ethan." The men exchanged glances, tense and unreadable. Mark's pulse thundered in his ears as he prepared for confrontation. Suddenly, from the shadows behind the men, a familiar voice called out, "Enough!" The men hesitated and parted to reveal Claire Matthews herself, standing tall and resolute, eyes burning with determination. Mark's breath caught. The woman who had disappeared years ago was alive and standing right in front of him. Claire's gaze met Mark's, fierce but compassionate. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," she said softly. "Ethan's safety depends on secrecy, but I will help you if you're ready to face the truth." Mark nodded, swallowing his fear. He was ready. Claire turned to the men, issuing orders with quiet authority. "Let them pass. It's time." As they moved past the men, Mark felt a surge of hope mixed with uncertainty. The truth was within reach, but the dangers lurking in the shadows were greater than he had imagined. Together, Mark, Daniel, and Claire pressed forward into the depths, prepared to face whatever lay ahead, for Ethan's sake. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Mark's mind was a whirlpool of emotions. Relief, confusion, hope, and fear all tangled together. Seeing Claire alive and standing before him was surreal. He had spent 8 years grieving, haunted by the absence of his son and the unanswered questions. Now, at last, a living thread connected him to the past. Claire led them into a small, dimly lit chamber carved into the rock. The flickering light of a single lantern cast shadows that danced on the walls. She gestured for Mark and Daniel to sit, and for the first time, she spoke openly. "I owe you an explanation," Claire began, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "When Ethan disappeared, I discovered something terrible, something that put him in grave danger." Mark leaned forward, hanging on her every word. "There's a group here in Willow Creek," she continued, "a secret society operating in the shadows. They have connections to powerful people, and they wanted Ethan because of what he knows, information he unknowingly carried with him." Claire's eyes flickered with pain. "I couldn't let them take him. So I hid him, moved him through these tunnels, kept him safe in secret locations. I thought it would be temporary. But something went wrong," Mark said softly. "You disappeared, and we lost all contact." Claire nodded. "Yes, the people hunting Ethan found out about me. They forced me to vanish. I've been hiding ever since, trying to protect him from a distance." Daniel added quietly, "We've been working together, trying to outsmart those who want to keep Ethan hidden forever. But the stakes are higher than ever." Mark felt a surge of determination. "Where is he now? We have to find him." Claire hesitated, then pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from her pocket. "This is the last location where Ethan was hidden, deep in the tunnels beneath the old church on Maple Street." Mark's breath caught. The old church was only a few miles from his home. The answer had been so close all along. "We don't have much time," Claire warned. "They're closing in, but if we move quickly, we can reach him." Mark stood, a fierce resolve burning in his eyes. "Let's go. I'm coming for my son." As they gathered their gear and prepared to leave, Mark felt a renewed sense of hope. The truth was finally within reach, and with Claire by his side, the impossible seemed possible. The journey ahead would be perilous, but Mark knew one thing for certain. He would never stop fighting for Ethan. The old church on Maple Street loomed ahead like a forgotten relic from another era. Its weathered stone walls were cracked and covered in ivy, the once vibrant stained glass windows now dull and broken. The wooden door creaked ominously as Mark, Claire, and Daniel pushed their way inside, the scent of damp wood and dust filling their nostrils. Inside, the church was eerily silent. Rows of empty pews stretched out before them, shadows pooling in the corners. The trio moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing against the high ceilings. Mark's heart pounded with anticipation and dread. This place held the last clue to Ethan's whereabouts, his chance to finally bring his son home. Claire led the way to the altar, where she pulled a loose stone from the floor. Beneath it lay a small iron ring, attached to a hidden trapdoor. She gripped it tightly and pulled, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Daniel flicked on his flashlight, illuminating the worn stone steps as they descended into the unknown. The air grew colder and heavier with each step. Mark's pulse quickened, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. At the bottom, they found themselves in a hidden chamber carved into the bedrock. The walls were lined with old wooden crates, faded letters, and forgotten belongings. Among the clutter, Mark's eyes immediately searched for any sign of Ethan. Then, in the far corner, something caught his attention. A small pair of shoes, dusty but unmistakably child-sized. Kneeling, Mark found a weathered notebook lying nearby, the pages yellowed with age. As he opened it, he recognized Ethan's handwriting, shaky but clear. The notebook contained drawings, stories, and messages, fragments of a life kept hidden, a child's attempt to hold on to hope. Mark's throat tightened as he read Ethan's words. "I'm waiting for you, Dad. Please don't give up." A flood of emotion surged through Mark, tears blurring his vision. After 8 years of silence, this was the closest he had come to his son. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the far end of the chamber, a soft shuffling sound. Mark's flashlight beam darted toward the sound, revealing a small figure curled up in the shadows. "Ethan!" Mark's voice cracked with emotion. The boy looked up, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Slowly, recognition dawned on his face. "Dad!" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Mark rushed forward, enveloping his son in a tight embrace. The years of pain, fear, and uncertainty melted away in that moment. Ethan was home, but their reunion was bittersweet. The danger was far from over. As Mark held Ethan close, he knew the shadowy forces that had stolen his son still lurked in the darkness, ready to strike. With renewed resolve, Mark vowed to protect Ethan at all costs. Together with Claire and Daniel, they prepared to face whatever threats lay ahead, united by love and the unbreakable bond of family. Mark held Ethan tightly, still unable to believe his son was finally safe in his arms. The reunion was overwhelming, but the danger surrounding them was as real as ever. The shadowy group that had kept Ethan captive wasn't going to let him go without a fight. Mark's mind raced. How could they escape this hidden underground labyrinth before their pursuers closed in? Claire stepped forward, her expression grim but determined. "We don't have much time," she warned. "The group has reinforcements coming. They know we're here." Daniel pulled out a worn map of the tunnels, showing several possible escape routes. "There's a secondary exit near the old mill on the edge of town. If we move quickly, we can get there before they do." Mark nodded, already forming a plan. "Ethan, stay close to me. We're getting out of here." As they gathered their belongings, Ethan clung to his father's hand, his small fingers trembling but steady. Mark glanced at him, filled with a fierce protectiveness. This boy had survived horrors no child should ever face, but now Mark vowed to shield him from harm forever. They moved quietly through the tunnels, sticking to the shadows. Every sound was magnified. The drip of water, the scrape of boots, the distant murmur of voices. Mark's senses were on high alert, every step bringing them closer to freedom or capture. At one point, they encountered a collapsed section of tunnel. Claire and Daniel worked quickly to clear a narrow path, the dust settling around them like a cloud of uncertainty. Time was slipping away, but they pressed on, driven by the hope of escape. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed behind them, a shout, followed by the pounding of footsteps. Their pursuers had found them. "Run!" Mark shouted, pulling Ethan forward. They sprinted down the tunnel, hearts pounding in unison. The air grew colder, the exit near. Emerging into the night air near the old mill, they didn't stop. Mark led them through the shadows of the overgrown grounds, weaving through broken machinery and rusted tools. The moonlight cast eerie shapes, but Mark's focus was unwavering. Finally, they reached a hidden gate that opened to a forest path. With no time to waste, they slipped through and disappeared into the night. Safe for now. As they slowed, catching their breath beneath the canopy of ancient trees, Mark looked down at Ethan. The boy's eyes were wide, but filled with a spark of hope. "We're going to be okay," Mark promised. "I'll never let anything happen to you again." Claire and Daniel exchanged relieved glances. The road ahead was uncertain, but together, they had taken the first step toward freedom. Mark knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in 8 years, he had his son, and that was worth everything. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. With every crunch of dry leaf beneath their feet and every distant echo of wind through the trees, Mark's senses stayed razor-sharp. He glanced down at Ethan, whose small legs moved wearily but determinedly alongside his. The boy had barely spoken since their escape, and Mark didn't press him. After 8 years of silence, a few more hours could wait. They reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the treetops in soft silver rays. Mark signaled for them to stop. "We'll rest here for a few minutes," he whispered. "We need to keep moving, but we can't outrun them if we're too exhausted." Claire nodded, checking the small radio in her hand. "Still no signal," she muttered. "We're on our own for now." Daniel walked the perimeter, scanning the dark for movement. "They'll be sweeping the area by now," he warned. "We bought ourselves a little time, but not much." Mark sat on a moss-covered log and gently pulled Ethan down beside him. He took a water bottle from his backpack, unscrewed the cap, and handed it to his son. "Here," he said softly, "drink something." Ethan took the bottle with both hands and sipped. His eyes, so much older than they should have been, lifted to his father's face. "I thought I'd never see you again," he whispered. Mark's chest tightened. He wrapped his arms around Ethan and held him close. "I never stopped looking for you." Not for one day. Ethan leaned into him, silent tears trailing down his cheeks. Claire knelt nearby, watching the two quietly. He stayed strong, Mark. All these years, he never gave up hope. Mark looked at her, emotion thick in his throat. You saved him, Claire. You protected him when I couldn't. I did what I had to, she replied. But it's not over yet. Just then, Daniel returned from the edge of the clearing. We got movement, he said. 2 flashlights about 200 yards west. They're sweeping through the brush slowly, looking for signs. Mark's expression hardened. We can't let them find us. Claire quickly unfolded the tunnel map again. There's a ranger station about a mile from here. If we cut through the ravine, we might reach it before they tighten their net. It's risky, Daniel said, but it's our best shot. Mark stood, taking Ethan's hand again. Then we move. We stay low, we stay quiet, and we keep going. I'm not losing him again. As they moved from the clearing, Ethan whispered, Dad, what if they catch us? Mark squeezed his son's hand. They won't. I promised your mom I'd always protect you. And I'm not breaking that promise. Not now, not ever. They descended into the ravine, moving with urgency. The terrain was rough, uneven, and slippery in places, but Mark stayed close to Ethan, supporting him whenever he stumbled. Behind them, the faint sound of dogs barking reached their ears, distant but growing. Claire paused to check the compass. 1/2 mile. We're close. Mark nodded. Every step forward was a victory, a defiance against the years of darkness that had tried to bury them. And in that moment, with the moonlight shimmering on the trees and the forest alive around them, Mark knew this wasn't just a rescue. This was redemption. And no matter what lay ahead, he would see it through. For Ethan. The forest was getting thicker now. Branches clawed at their clothes and faces, the underbrush growing denser with every step. The moon had disappeared behind a veil of clouds, casting everything into a deeper darkness. Mark's grip on Ethan's hand never loosened as they pushed forward, following the barely visible trail that curved through the ravine toward the ranger station. Claire led the way, eyes locked on the compass, her mind calculating angles and distances with the urgency of someone who knew time was rapidly running out. Daniel brought up the rear, ever watchful, pausing frequently to listen for the sounds of pursuit. The barking of dogs had faded slightly, but they all knew it wouldn't be long before the trackers regained their scent. Careful here, Claire whispered as she climbed over a fallen tree. There's a drop ahead. They reached the edge of a narrow slope, the ground slick with damp moss and loose stones. One wrong step, and any of them could tumble into the rocks below. Mark knelt beside Ethan and whispered, I'll go first. Watch where I step. Okay. Ethan nodded solemnly, his trust absolute. Mark made his way down carefully, testing each foothold before signaling for Ethan to follow. With Daniel's steady hands guiding from above and Mark ready to catch from below, Ethan navigated the slope like a seasoned hiker. Claire came next, slipping slightly but catching herself on a root. Once they all reached the bottom, Mark took a breath and looked around. The air was cooler here, the trees arching overhead like silent sentinels. It was oddly peaceful, too peaceful. The silence pressed in around them like a warning. Daniel scanned the woods. Something's not right, he muttered. They're not chasing. They're hurting. Mark's stomach dropped. You think they're trying to trap us? Exactly. They know where we're headed. They're not rushing us because they want us to go there. Claire turned, a flicker of realization in her eyes. The ranger station. What if it's not safe? What if they've already secured it? Mark clenched his jaw. Then we don't go there. But we're out of options, Claire replied. There's no time to double back. Ethan tugged on his father's sleeve. I know another way. They all looked at him, surprised. There's a path, Ethan said, pointing toward a wall of brambles off to their right. I saw it once. One of the guards used it to sneak out. It's hidden, but it leads to a cabin. Mark knelt to his son's level. Are you sure? Ethan nodded. He said it was his backup place. He kept supplies there. I remember. Daniel exchanged a glance with Claire. It's a long shot, but if it's real, it's our best chance. Without hesitation, Mark said, then we follow Ethan. The brambles were thick and thorny, tearing at their clothes and skin, But Ethan moved with uncanny precision, as if guided by memory more than sight. Mark was in awe of his son's calm. Despite the fear, despite the trauma, Ethan was leading them now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they broke through into a clearing. A small, weather-beaten cabin sat at the center, tucked beneath a canopy of trees, nearly invisible from above. Its windows were boarded, the door padlocked. Mark stepped forward and kicked the lock clean off with a grunt. The door creaked open to reveal a dusty interior. Old supplies, a cot, a lantern. But most importantly, safety. They hurried inside, pulling the door shut and dragging a shelf in front of it. Claire lit the lantern, bathing the room in a warm, flickering glow. For the first time since leaving the tunnels, they allowed themselves to breathe. Ethan sat down, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Mark wrapped a blanket around him and sat by his side. "You did good, buddy," he said softly. "You saved us." Ethan looked up and smiled for the first time. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the trees. The danger wasn't gone, but they had found a pocket of hope, because the boy they'd all tried to protect had just saved them all. The cabin groaned as the wind howled through the surrounding trees, each gust battering the walls like the forest itself was trying to warn them. Rain had started to fall, tapping against the roof in a nervous rhythm. Inside, the lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Claire stood by the small boarded window, peeking through a crack in the wood. "No movement," she whispered. "But it's too quiet. They could be circling." Mark was crouched beside Ethan, who had finally drifted off to sleep, his head resting on his father's lap. Daniel sat by the door, a rusted hunting rifle in his lap, one of the few useful things they'd found inside the cabin. "This storm bought us some time," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "But they're not going to give up. Not now." Mark ran a hand over Ethan's hair, careful not to wake him. He remembered this place like it was yesterday, he said. Even after everything, he still found the way. Claire turned to look at them, her face drawn and pale in the lantern light. "I don't think we understand just how strong he is." Mark nodded. "No, but we're going to." Thunder rolled above them, a low, growling sound that shook the ground beneath their feet. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked loudly. All three adults froze. Daniel stood slowly, moving toward the window with calculated care. He peered through a narrow gap between the boards. "Flashlight," he whispered. "Far side of the clearing. Just one." Claire stepped beside him. "Could be a scout. Or bait," Daniel replied. "They want us to think it's safe, that it's just one man." Mark gently laid Ethan down on the cot and stood. "We need to be ready. If they breach this place, we don't have much to fight with." Daniel checked the chamber of the rifle. 2 rounds. "That's it." Claire grabbed a hatchet from the cabin's fireplace. "I've got this." Mark nodded, grabbing an old metal pipe from the supply pile. "And I've got this." A tense silence settled over the cabin as they took positions. Mark and Daniel by the door, Claire by the back window. Outside, the rain fell harder, mixing with wind and thunder until it became a roaring curtain of noise. Then, the sound they were dreading. Footsteps, squishing through the mud, approaching from multiple directions. Claire's eyes met Mark's. "They're surrounding us." Ethan stirred, waking with a start. "Dad!" Mark rushed to him, kneeling. "It's okay. We're in the cabin you remembered. You brought us here, remember?" Ethan nodded sleepily, then his eyes grew wide. "They're coming." Mark held him close. "We're ready." The first knock came, slow, deliberate, against the front door. Daniel raised the rifle. Then a voice, muffled by the storm. "Mr. Carter, we don't want the boy harmed, but we can't let him leave with you." Mark's jaw tightened. "He's not going anywhere with you. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Think about the boy. Do you want another incident like Halloween?" That name, Halloween, sent a chill through the room. Mark stood, fury radiating from him. "You took 8 years from him. From us. If you want him, you'll have to go through me." Silence. Then a reply, calm and venomous. "That could be arranged." Suddenly, the windows rattled, hands pounding against the sides of the cabin, voices shouting. The assault had begun. Daniel fired a shot through the window. Someone screamed. Mark shoved the cot, with Ethan underneath the staircase alcove. Stay there, no matter what happens. Claire and Daniel fought at the front, holding off the intruders with every ounce of strength and desperation. Mark stood over Ethan, guarding him like a fortress. The cabin became a war zone, thunder crashing above, gunfire ringing out, with splintering and screams cutting through the night. But even through the chaos, Ethan didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just watched his father, his hero, stand between him and the monsters. And for the first time in 8 long years, he knew he wasn't alone. The storm raged outside like the earth itself had decided to fight back. Rain hammered the roof, the thunder howled, and yet the true violence came from within the walls of that tiny cabin. Daniel stood his ground at the front door, the rifle clenched tightly in his hands. The first shot had bought them time, but now the invaders were pressing in, banging against the walls, hammering at the windows, determined to breach. Claire gritted her teeth, swinging the hatchet at a hand that pushed through a broken board near the side window. Blood sprayed, and the intruder fell back with a scream. "They're coming in," she shouted. Mark pulled Ethan deeper beneath the stairs, shielding him with his body. "Close your eyes, Ethan. Don't move. I've got you. I'm not afraid," Ethan whispered. Mark blinked back tears. "I know, buddy. You're braver than all of us." A loud crack split the air as the front door buckled under a massive blow. Daniel stepped back just in time as it swung inward, revealing 2 men in black rain-soaked gear, their faces hidden by masks. One held a baton, the other a taser. Daniel raised a rifle, bang. The man with the baton dropped, a burst of red blooming from his chest. The second rushed forward, taser sizzling. Claire lunged, screaming, and drove the hatchet into his shoulder. The taser flew from his hand, skittering across the floor. The man fell, writhing in pain, and Claire kicked him hard in the side, sending him tumbling out the door into the mud. More footsteps approached. "We can't hold them off much longer," Daniel shouted, yanking the door shut and wedging a broken chair beneath the handle. "They'll be back with more." Mark knew it was true. They were running out of time, and out of luck. Then he remembered something. "The trapdoor," he gasped. "Ethan, you said the guard who used this cabin had a backup way out. Did he ever mention a tunnel?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Yes, under the floor." Mark scrambled to the far corner of the cabin, tearing back the dusty rug. There, barely visible, was a wooden hatch. He pulled it open. A narrow shaft descended into darkness. "It's here," he yelled. "Everyone down." Claire grabbed Ethan, while Daniel held off another attack at the window. As Mark climbed down first, the tunnel walls closed in around him, dirt, stone, roots, but it was real. Not a fantasy. A real escape. "Send him down," Mark called. Claire gently lowered Ethan into the shaft. Mark caught him and whispered, "Almost there, buddy." Claire dropped in next, panting, bruised but alive. Then Daniel. Just as another body crashed through the cabin window above, Daniel yanked the hatch closed and bolted it from beneath. The sound of chaos became muffled. Darkness enveloped them. A single flashlight beam cut through the black as Mark led the way through the narrow passage. It twisted and dipped, every step a gamble, but they didn't stop. Not now. They crawled for what felt like forever, the air growing damp and thin. Then finally, the tunnel opened up to a metal grate. Mark shoved it open, and cold, fresh air rushed in. They had emerged into the edge of the forest, well past the cabin. The sounds of pursuit were far behind. Mark lifted Ethan into his arms, heart pounding, rain pouring down his face. The forest beyond was soaked but alive with hope. Claire pointed. "There, lights." In the distance, the faint glow of a ranger station flickered through the trees. They had made it. "I can run ahead," Daniel said, already sprinting toward salvation. "I'll get help." Mark held Ethan close as Claire supported him. Behind them, the storm screamed, but in front of them, the first signs of safety had finally appeared. "Almost home," Mark whispered. "Just a little more." Ethan, eyes wide and steady, whispered back, "We're free." The rain had finally eased, thinning to a gentle mist that hung like a veil over the forest. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and gold. After so many years of darkness, it felt like the first true morning. Mark clutched Ethan in his arms as they trudged through the trees, Claire steady at his side, her hand wrapped tightly around his. Behind them, the tunnel entrance was nothing more than shadows and wet leaves. Ahead, the ranger station's floodlights cut through the mist like a beacon. Minutes later, Daniel burst out from the front door of the small building, followed by two stunned-looking forest rangers. The men ran toward them, hands raised, concern in their eyes. "He's here," Daniel shouted. "He's got his son. Call the police, the FBI, everyone." The rangers didn't ask questions. One pulled out a radio, barking orders and calling him back up. The other gently helped Mark lower Ethan onto a cot inside the station. Ethan blinked at the fluorescent lights, the warmth of the heater, the sudden rush of clean, safe air. His small hands clenched the blanket they wrapped around him. "You're safe now," one ranger whispered, his voice trembling. Within the hour, sirens could be heard wailing in the distance. Police vehicles, black SUVs, ambulances, all poured into the clearing like a river of justice. A team of agents swept past the ranger station, heading straight toward the forest, guns drawn, radios crackling. The hunt for the men behind Ethan's disappearance had officially begun. Mark sat beside Ethan, holding his hand, unable to speak. Claire stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, the other covering her mouth as tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Daniel leaned against the far wall, exhausted but alive, a deep satisfaction in his eyes. When the paramedics examined Ethan, they found scars, physical and psychological. But to everyone's astonishment, he was stronger than expected. Malnourished, yes. Shaken, but not broken, not even close. "He's been through hell," one medic murmured. "But he's still here. He's still fighting." The media explosion was instant. News trucks, reporters, camera crews, all converged on the forest, desperate to understand the miracle unfolding before their eyes. But authorities kept them at bay. The Carters needed time, space, and healing. That evening, Mark and Ethan were taken to a secure hospital facility. Claire rode with them, never once letting go of Ethan's hand. Daniel followed in a separate vehicle, hailed as a hero. Inside the hospital, Mark sat by Ethan's bedside as he slept, monitors beeping softly in the background. "I missed you," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his son's face. "Every day, every hour." Ethan stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. "I knew you'd come. I waited." Mark's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry it took so long." "You didn't give up," Ethan said simply. "That's what matters." Tears rolled silently down Mark's cheeks as he kissed his son's forehead. In the following days, the full truth began to emerge. The men who had taken Ethan were part of a covert network, experimenting with memory control, indoctrination, and conditioning in children. Ethan had been one of their test subjects, but their operation unraveled the moment Ethan escaped. With the information Ethan had buried deep in his mind, and now remembered, federal agents were able to track, arrest, and dismantle the organization. Public outrage was swift, but what echoed more loudly was the hope. A boy lost for 8 years, now found. A father who never stopped searching. A family reunited. Months later, Mark, Claire, and Ethan stood on the front porch of a newly rebuilt home. Not the same house from before, but a place filled with fresh beginnings. The town welcomed them with open arms. Claire resumed her work at the library. Daniel joined the sheriff's office as a special investigator. And Ethan began to live. He laughed again. He learned again. He played again. And every Halloween, instead of fear, the family celebrated a miracle. The night their son had returned. On that porch under the stars, Mark wrapped an arm around Ethan's shoulders. "You brought us back together," he said softly. Ethan smiled, leaning into his father. "Because you never let go." The wind rustled the trees. The night was calm, and for the first time in 8 long years, they were home. Thank you so much for watching this story. There are wounds that feel like they'll never heal, nights so dark they seem endless, but even in the deepest shadows, there's always a glimmer of light. The story of Mark, Claire, and Ethan wasn't just about a missing child. It was about the power of love, the strength of family, and the miracle of never giving up. Through heartbreak, loss, and the weight of unanswered questions, their bond remained unbreakable, and their hope led them home. We hope this story touched your heart as much as it touched ours. If you felt something while watching, if this journey moved you, then please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment to share your thoughts, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and share it with someone who still believes in hope, love, and second chances. Your support means everything to us. It's what allows us to keep telling stories that matter. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and never stop believing in the power of love.